We are having a conversation with Lynn Rice-Lively from the University of Texas at Austin. What is the difference between the traditional library and non-traditional library?
That's a good question. And I think when I think of a traditional library, I'm thinking, well, in the United States, we go back to the Harvard Library, which was the first academic library in the country. And it was prestigious. The people who attended Harvard, which at that time, of course, were mostly men, had access. They were scholars. And they were studying for the general benefits of being a knowledgeable, educated person, not necessarily for a profession like we think of education today. And so this was the place where they could go to find books that would help educate them. And so it was the role of the librarian to, and in fact, in the job description of the Harvard librarian was, this person must be a gentleman and must be a scholar. In some sense, they also had to be a curator. They had to take care of these materials. So I think I would say traditionally, the library has been a place where they'll purchase materials, organize them, make them available, through checkout or through reference, and then have staff who are there to assist people who physically come into the library. So all these things involve physical objects. You're taking a physical book off the shelf. You're reading a magazine that's there. Now, libraries are not, they're still important physical places. We were having a conversation the other day at one of our recent professional conferences. They had architects talking about how much fun it is to design these gorgeous new library buildings because you didn't have to clutter them up with books. They were just these spaces that could be beautiful where people would go in and they'd be comfortable and they'd be using their computer or visiting or talking to each other or planning a project. But they're these wonderful open spaces and you don't have these books blocking the light, And yet they're still building these facilities. So a virtual library, I think, is one where we're not so dependent on these physical objects. We can access ebooks. You can check out an electronic book if a library has that particular service and download it to your PDA or your telephone or whatever device, or, there are ebook readers that they have. You can ask questions through chat, whereas in a traditional library, you have to physically go there. Maybe you can call on the telephone, if a library offers that particular service. But you have to have some kind of physical direct contact with a human being. In a virtual library, it's our goal to subscribe to electronic databases of full-text resources and have the person who can sit in their office or in their home, they're doing their research, in the comfort of their living room, using a wireless network and downloading full text of articles without ever leaving the house. And it's spoiling us. We don't want to be bothered to have to physically go in to this space. So that's the way I see a difference between the physical and the virtual library. Also, the way we organize material is very different. In a traditional library, we have, these very elaborate numbering systems. The library here uses the Dewey Decimal System. In most academic libraries in the States, we use the LC classification system. And so we have developed these schemes to allow people to find an object in a certain place, hopefully, as long as somebody hadn't taken it off the shelf or misshelved it or whatever. In the virtual world, we have to find new ways of organizing things because we don't have to know the Dewey Decimal System or the LC classification system. So we have to get into people's heads and think about how do they, what terms are they going to use to search something. So it's a very different kind of skill. You have to design these virtual spaces so that they are people-friendly. You don't need to go take a test or take a class on how do I find material in a certain website. It should just be intuitive by looking at it. And so that's a very important role that I think librarians play, is trying to organize things in this virtual world in a way that anyone who can read, and sometimes even for children who are not reading, anyone can use a computer, whether it's using symbols or pictures or whatever. So that's a new role, a very different role for librarians, I think, today.
So what is the most compelling challenge for librarians and library users?
Yeah. I think, since I'm an educator and I work in preparing people for this profession, I would say when we have a new class of students coming in and they're sitting there in their new student orientation, one of the things that we tell them is to be open and be flexible. Oftentimes they're coming into a profession with a preconceived notion, maybe based on what they experienced as a child in a library, or they read in a book, and we're saying, abandon all those preconceptions of what it takes to be a librarian or an information professional. And what you have to do is learn certain skills, learn critical thinking skills, learn problem-solving skills, and know that your role is going to be constantly changing and changing much more quickly than it has, say 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So some of the challenges are, how do you educate someone for a role that we haven't even imagined yet? And I think that's the way we have to think about it. Now from a library user or an information user's perspective, I'm not sure they care. I'm not sure they have certain expectations. I think their expectations of librarians or information specialists are pretty low because they've never really understood. Our profession has we keep a very low profile, and we're sort of humble about the skills we have. So people don't even know in the States that you have to have a master's degree. They think you can just walk into a library and get a job and there you are. But it takes a lot of education and preparation to do that. So we sort of disguise the complexity of these information worlds by constantly working to make it easy for the information user. And I don't think that's going to change. They're not, when you access the library's website or when you look at a collection of resources in a digital library that maybe a library's put together, you don't have any understanding of the technologies that it took to do that, because the goal is always, let's make it as easy and as seamless as we can for this user. So the goal of the library professional is to try to create these seamless virtual environments. And so for the user, they don't know. They don't even think about who did this? Who organized this in such a way that it's easy for me to use. I think and this is a challenge for both the information professional and for the information user, is how to be discerning of the quality of the information they're accessing. I was reading something the other day about what we call deep web searching. And when we do a Google search or search on Yahoo, we're searching a very thin surface of information. I mean, it seems like a lot, when you type something in and you get 2 million hits, that seems like a lot. There's so much more information that's available electronically that is not indexed by these search engines. A search engine doesn't index. Everybody thinks Google gives you access to everything that's on the internet. That's not true. It only gives you access to what things their robots that go out and no bots that go out and search the internet, the only thing that they've been trained to bring back. And so I think a challenge for the information specialist is to help the user see that. And it'll be the information specialist who has these special skills for doing this deep web searching and knowing that just because something is the top of the list when you do a Google search, that may be just because that's the first thing people are getting. The more people access it to, I don't know how the Google search engine works, but it may be that the frequency of access to this particular material is what drove it to top, not the fact that it's the highest quality information.
Thank you very much for sharing this time with us and for sharing these ideas.
Excellent. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.